Okay, just a few words. We signed up with the TML for attorneys for the city. We've had 4 responses. I've got copies from 2, but we won't be discussing the contents thereof because I have an agenda item on that. So we had a meeting today with Judge Wolf. He called it the Mayor's Breakfast. Mickey Ball was there with me, and we found it to be quite informative. There was a few things that were discussed that would probably take too much time. We have a lot of work to do, but I think it's going to be a good effort. There's a lot of good information that can come out of that type of an environment. And that's all the small cities in Bear County. There's, I think, 27 of us.
26.
26?
26. San
Okay.
Antonio makes 27.
Yeah, well, San Antonio, I don't think, they didn't represent it
No.
today, but we enjoy that. And so at this time, we will into item 4 on the agenda, citizens to be heard. This item will be open for up to 30 minutes, with 3 minutes for each speaker. And if there's more than 10 speakers, we will reduce the time per speaker to 2 minutes. And it looks like we only have 3 speakers signed up. Is there anybody else that wants to speak? Okay, BJ? Okay, Catherine Rendall?
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I've got a couple of points I want to make tonight for your consideration. Before I do, though, I think we need to do an update on actionable items on agendas. I know I've brought this up several times before, but January's regular meeting, there were 9 items on the agenda other than the standard 4 at the beginning. And of those 9 items, 2 were postponed, 5 had no action taken, and 1 item, which had previously been tabled, was tabled again. We've got a lot more work to do to get through all these agenda items. I don't know how you're going to do it, but this isn't acceptable. The second point I want to make is my disappointment in this city council's response to its citizens. Several weeks ago, I used the city's official website, sent out an email basically making a plea to the city council to help us with that vote counting strategy that was going on with the WPPOA. I received a response from only 2 of you, Joel Ortega, Doug Tomasini. I want to thank you both and let you know that I'm going to remember that come election time. Third point, and I'll keep this fairly short as well, and that's about conflict of interest. Now that the WPPOA is trying to resurrect itself, we have, in my mind and in the minds of several other people I've talked to, very definite conflicts of interest. Our mayor is the president of the WPPOA. Our city clerk is the vice president of the WPPOA. And our city attorney is on record as having done work for the WPPOA in its deliberations with Waterwood Development, plus he's the mayor of Von Ormy. Now, I don't understand how this could not be a conflict of interest, so I am requesting tonight that the city council develop and present their definition of conflict of interest that they're willing to live by. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rendall. James Davis?
Very first city council meeting that y'all had, y'all created a total of 2% in sales tax. Now, according to Texas law, you can only have a maximum of 8 1/4. And Texas takes up 6 1/4, so you can have up to 2. You created 2. The problem is that between the time that you created the 2% and what was on the actual ballot, whoever submitted paperwork for the propositions to be on the ballot changed what you created. You created 1% for general purpose, you created 0.5% for general purpose, and you created 0.5% for road maintenance. What everybody voted on, though, was 1/4 for road maintenance. City Council never approved changing 1/2 to 1/4. Jim Clement knew at the polling location that it had been changed on the day of the vote. Problem with the change is that, or the problem with all the taxes rather, is that VIA already exists. VIA is a 1/2 cent tax that already exists, which means that of the 2%, 1/2 of it's already gone. You can only create up to 1.5. Jim Clement told me at the polling location that VIA was 1/4%, which means that the math actually would have added up. Whoever changed the paperwork changed it so that it would look like it would be okay if VIA was kept. VIA was kept. The voters kept VIA. In fact, a larger percentage of the amount of voters who voted in favor for the VIA tax is larger than the amount of voters who voted in favor of our mayor when he ran unopposed. When you set up taxes, you set it up so that there would be more than the legal limit. You even approved the minutes of that meeting. If it had gone through, if the person who submitted the paperwork hadn't changed it, we would have gone over by 1/2 percentage point. And instead we went over 1/4 percentage point. You have created a situation in which there are more sales taxes than what's legally allowable by Texas law. Of the 6 city councilmen, sorry, of the 5 city councilmen, 4 of you voted in favor of it. Vicky Ball did not. The mayor proposed the full 2% of the taxes at the very first city council meeting. And the problem is that you didn't do research ahead of time. If it wasn't for Mickey Ball and her last name, this city council would have no balls. It's very, very simple math. 8 1/4 minus 6 1/4 equals 2. VIA is 1/2. That means you have 1.5 left. It is not the voters' fault that we have more sales taxes created than what's legally allowed. It is your fault for creating the situation. Another problem is the fact that whoever's in charge of setting that up hasn't done so yet. If you go down to Super Express and you buy something, you pay taxes 6 3/4. 6 1/4 for the state, and an additional 1/2 for VIA Metropolitan. So you're not going to bring in any sales tax for this quarter. Now, according to someone representing VIA Metropolitan Transportation Authority, they only bring in $1,000 for that quarter. Which means that if you were to have a legal set of taxes, not an illegal amount set of taxes, you would only bring in $3,000 a month. Times 12 months, that's $36,000. That's only 1/3 the amount of money that Art Martinez-Ibarra said that we would bring in.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Don Harnica?
You guys don't mind to go to Remain City? When last I addressed this city council, I indicated that you were a major disappointment to me. Well, now you're just an outright embarrassment. I refer, of course, to item number 17 on the agenda. And an effort to yet again get the sales tax for the VIA removed from this city. Keeping in mind that I am not asking questions that I do not know the answer to, I pose this query. Why should this be necessary if indeed the voters have already approved keeping that tax by a 2/3 majority? After all, the only people who matter are the people who vote. If any of you would like to find out what I believe is the actual answer to that question, you'll find my email address at the bottom of the copy for the Freedom of Information Act request I placed in front of each of your tables, or places at the table. If you will get in touch with me, I would be more than happy to tell you what I believe is the reason that agenda item is on the agenda again. I don't actually expect to hear from any of you, possible exception of one or two. But nonetheless, it's there. Incidentally, for the folks in the audience, I have a copy of what I have just stated and a copy of the request for Freedom of Information Act information on the back table. Feel free to pick up a copy and take it with you. And do keep in mind that my email address is at the bottom of the letter. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Farmington. BJ Gillespie, you can stay sitting down if you want.
Okay,
to,
no,
BJ.
I'm good.
Okay.
What I wanted to bring up is the fact that none of the citizens has any idea how much our city attorney is to be paid. I think we have a right to know that, and I think that should, you know, let's get things out in the open and let us know how much is being paid. I know on the proposed budget for 2015, that wasn't approved, the one that, listed all the different things, it was down there for $36,000 a year for our city attorney, which it's a part-time job. I looked on the internet with just quickly and came up with two, and this was from the TML, the Texas Municipal League website. New Braunfels and Corpus Christi are both looking for city attorneys. Using the formula that I was told brought that salary up, that $36,000 a year, is because the city attorney of Von Army makes $12,000 a year. And since Sandy Oaks has 3 times the population of Von Army, thus it should be 3 times the salary. There we get the $36,000. Now, if we use that formula for the city of New Braunfels, the job opening in New Braunfels for a city attorney is $62,000 a year, and it's a full-time position. Now, if we use that mathematical formula that came up with the $36,000 for a city attorney for Sandy Oaks, the New Braunfels city attorney should be paid $560,000 a year. If we apply that same formula to the job opening in Corpus Christi, they're offering $60,681,000 a year for a full-time city attorney. If we use that same formula, that city attorney should actually be paid $2.9 million per year. So, please, how about doing some research on what some city attorneys in the small towns and the small cities in Texas are being paid? I have here, if anybody's welcome to this copy, I only made 1 copy of it. Pulled it off the internet in about 5 minutes. It's 8 different law firms in San Antonio whose practice is municipal law. I also have here, if someone would like it, anybody, It's a list of the cities, it's smaller cities, towns, and villages between, population between 1,000 and 6,000 residents in Texas. I've gone through and marked the cities that are between 3 and 4,000, population of 3 and 4,000. I'm sure anybody on the city council could get more information than I can, is just, a resident, a citizen of Sandy Oaks. If somebody would like this, to go through this list and see if they can contact some smaller cities, see what their city attorneys are being paid. I don't know how we can look for a city attorney when we don't know how much you offering a city attorney that you're been so diligently looking for. So if anybody wants this, they're either of these or both, they're welcome to have them.
You can leave them, you put them right here if you want, that'll be fine. Okay. You have anything else?
No, that's it, that's it.
Okay, thank you, BJ. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Sir, can I just ask a question?
Yes,
You-
ma'am.
you are going
What is your name, please?
Veronica, my name's Veronica. Are we paying these fees again? Are we go back to paying our maintenance fees?
That's not an item for this forum here, okay? But I got mine, and I paid mine.
I just wanted to know if I was the only one that got it.
No, we all got them.
No, you didn't.
Okay.
Can I,
Yes, ma'am.
I noticed in your agenda, it says that the notice was posted at Jack's on the 9th, but Jack's has been all,
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. I'll clear that up right now. We had stated way back at the beginning, because of the gate being locked most of the time on the park, and by law, that door over there, which is the most, the easiest one to get to, that's where it's supposed to be put. But because of that particular difficulty, we opted to have the agenda and the notice put on the gate to this park and also at Jack's Corner. Well, about a month or so ago, Annie Morrell passed away. And we still were putting the notices up. Her son Jack inherited all of her assets. She willed everything to him and left all the other children out. Well, late last week, Jack Morrell died from a heart attack. From one end of that property to the other, there has been a fence put up. It is posted. There was no way of putting this agenda.
I just thought this should be
on
correct.
that, yes.
Yeah, correctly, because it
This
says it was.
this was made up before I knew that there was a fence across there, okay? I'll bite the bullet.
Well, I just thought it should be
was not posted
corrected.
at Jack's, folks,
Yeah.
and
I understand why and everything, but I just want to make sure it gets
Yeah.
corrected because it's signed and everything.
oh yes, it will not be on next month's or the next agenda that's to be posted. It will not be at Jack's.
Right.
Uh,
But will this be corrected because it wasn't
Oh,
posted?
yes, it'll be corrected. It'll be corrected, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
It kind of took me by surprise that young Jack had passed away, so
Yeah.
we'll, okay. Item 5 on the agenda is a consent agenda. We have the meetings, the minutes for the meeting of 8 January 2015, the minutes of January 20th, 2015, and the minutes from October, I believe it's October 9th of 2014, to be considered as a unit. If anybody has anything that they don't agree with on it, we can pull that particular thing, but if there's a typo, we can surely take care of it right here.
Rather than postpone or bring this up again another meeting, I move to amend agenda item 9 and add the fact that Mr. Campos' request for building this commercial building on Waterwood House, I think we made it clear, we asked him to we requested that he show us building plans, as well as give us a letter of intent on what type of business he was going to be running there. And I don't see that anywhere in the minutes. So I would make a motion that we amend the minutes to add that,
Which minutes are they?
and I'll approve it based on that
January
amendment.
20th.
January 20th.
Okay.
January 20th, agenda item 9, that we add, that we requested building plans from Mr. Campos, as well as a letter of intent on the type of business that he will operate there.
I see you think, I believe that Mr. Campos told us that there weren't any. At that particular time.
And
Yeah.
that he would provide us that. He
Yeah.
didn't have any problem with it. But I'd like to see that in the minutes.
Okay.
So that doesn't happen, and it comes up later that whatever type of business they decide to put there, repairing 18-wheelers coming in and out of there, or at the entrance of the subdivision.
No, I wouldn't go for that either.
So, based on that amendment, I'll approve the minutes.
Can we get that in there, Sean?
So the motion is to amend minutes of January 20th with that amendment.
Okay.
I'll second
Need a
that.
second.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a motion to approve with the exception noted, in addition to the January 20 minutes on Mr. Campos's request for the automobile repair facility.
I'll second.
Ms. Ball second, and Mr. Tremblay made the motion. Ms. Ball seconded. Any other questions? All those in favor? Unanimous? Okay. Item number 6, the update on the background clearance for Mr. Jesse Gutierrez for the marshal position. Do we have anything?
Best I can give you is, yes, he is a certified peace officer. My contacts with the San Antonio Police Department have dried up in the 18 years I've been retired from there and moved on. And with their current situation and turmoil between the city and the departments, they're not willing to give me anything in writing. My suggestion to you is if you need any further information on this gentleman, that maybe we ask Mr. Martinez if, Martinez Tavares, if his city marshal, I'm sure that your people, when they come in, you have to do a background check of some sort. You have that ability to take care of that. Like I say, if you're needing something other than that, I've got no problem with the gentleman. As far as I know, he is a certified peace officer. There's nothing in his background that's gonna hurt us. But
We could do a publicdata.com search.
And I mean,
T-close.
like I say, just the people that I knew that used to do this are no longer in the offices doing it, and the ones that are there now are not willing to give you anything in writing at the moment. So, like I say, it shouldn't take your office, but maybe a day to get that done if they actually did it.
Yeah, it's a 5-minute process.
Okay.
I'll ask.
Okay.
it's from Bear County Sheriff?
As well, yes.
Okay.
Any law enforcement officer, any law enforcement department has that capability because they have to screen dogs.
Is there a fee for that?
Typically not.
I'm sorry?
Typically not.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's usually the kind of thing that they subscribe, they've already incurred the cost, so.
Well, Mr. Thomasini.
There used to be a fee, unless they've changed it, there wasn't a fee in Bear County.
I'll go to the sheriff's department
Okay,
and do that.
I think it's important that
I've
we get
got
that
a
done.
few more hours.
I mean, if we ask Mr. Guti, he may pay for it himself if we just,
No.
No,
That's
no,
not fair.
he's gonna volunteer.
I
to
would,
run.
you know what, if it comes down to it, I'm willing to pay for it and seek reimbursement at a future date when we may have money, depending on what it costs. I mean, if it's $5, it's $5.
No, let's not ask somebody who's gonna volunteer to pay for his background check.
Here, let me write that
is he
down.
pretty enthused?
That would be tacky, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so, I'll go to the sheriff.
Excuse me. Does he have a current Texas certified peace officer's license?
Yes, he does. He actually works as a peace officer in Floresville.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see why he would need a background check.
Yeah,
If he already holds a current.
Oh, yeah, he is definitely a peace officer. There's not a problem with that.
Okay. Okay, so, let's, wanna leave that one, open until we
Right.
get a
So,
definite,
no action on this one right
yeah,
now.
no action.
Well, we could get an update.
Okay, item number 7, discussion approve manning the Waterwood Clubhouse for 4 hours on Saturdays as a means of communication with the citizens of Sandy Oaks, presented by Alderman Tremblay and Gay.
Okay, just like people are having a problem trying to get answers or whatever, although if we are to do this, if everyone is on board with this and we have access to the building, it would be one, no more than 2 members here, so that we're not constituted a quorum. But we can at least hear what folks have to say, and it may eliminate having to do the citizens to be heard thing at every meeting, whereas we would already have the information. I'm proposing something like 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturdays, based again on availability of the building, and if there's going to be a cost involved, what that cost would be. I know I'm willing to do it. I spoke with Ernest about it. He doesn't have a problem with it, so we're going to try and want to sell it here to the rest of the council.
And even if it's something that we find that we don't need every single week, we could do it bi-weekly if it came down to that.
I think we could start out.
We could start out with weekly
every
though,
Saturday,
absolutely,
and then
yeah.
we could change it later on. So that's what I'm proposing.
So are you suggesting that the same 2
No,
representatives for
Well,
all 4
and I have a
hours?
calendar, I brought it.
I was just gonna ask.
And after the meeting, if this passes, we can go ahead and pass this around, we can sign up, and people are be more than
2-hour
welcome to
increments
swap.
or 1 hour or
I have
whatever?
no problem doing 4 hours, but if you want to, however we can get it
Okay.
done, and you can swap, you can do whatever, but we really need to be careful that we're not more than 2 people here at
Yes.
any given time.
Yes.
So that's my motion, to do that. I'll ask the mayor just for what his concern, if any, is on acquiring this building on Saturdays from 10 to 2. Is the building open on Saturdays from 10 to, is it open regardless?
Unless the building is rented by somebody holding a party, usually that's later in the day. But and they always want to have like an hour before or something to decorate.
So who do we need,
but
who do we need to speak to about getting the building?
I can take care of it.
Okay. Well, that's my motion. I motion that
And of
we
course, I second it.
set up a clubhouse
Okay,
for 4 hours on
to
Saturdays from 10 to 2.
item 7.
Do we have a time that we would start?
10 a.m.
Let's
No, I
say-
mean, when we would begin doing
Let's
it.
say we would, what is this, this is February, let's say we start the first Saturday in March.
Tremblay has a motion on the floor, seconded by Mr. Gay, to have the building here open for 4 hours on Saturdays, beginning the 1st of March, as a means of communicating with the community. You'll probably get a lot of people that are willing to come and talk, or afraid to talk in a group of people. So on that, the motion has been made by Mr. Tremblay, seconded by Mr. Gay. Anybody have any other questions on that? If not, all those in favor? We have unanimous. Very good. Item number 8 on the agenda, discuss requiring a city permit for merchandise and food sales on any property within the city limits that is not a established business, presented by Alderman Tremblay and Mr. Gay.
You can chime in anytime you like.
Yeah, well,
I'll start out with it.
what we're looking for on this one, I'm sure most of you have noticed up there at the entrance coming in on Waterwood Pass, where the beautiful fireworks stand is, there is I call them roach coaches, but anyway, it's a taco truck that comes in, he sets up a tent, he puts a table out, he's basically selling food in there. There should be city tax collected, whether he does or not, we don't know. On other times, you will see a group of tables set up across there, and it looks like a miniature flea market. That is not something that we need coming into the area of our city like that. And I think if we make where there is a permit, where they have to have a permit to do it, and I don't mean a permit, one permit that's good forever. I mean a permit, if you're gonna do it on a daily basis, you get a daily or a monthly permit, or you get it as you're going along.
Is that our property or is that,
It's business property there, yes.
okay.
Is it theirs?
What about garage sales?
But these are, as businesses, these are not yard sales, these are food sales, up at the corner, food sales.
Right, because the way this is worded,
No.
it covers garage sales.
That is not an established, no, these are, this
That's
is
not
beyond
our intent.
commercial property. And if there's a problem, we'll amend it.
Is it their property?
Let's say that, again, I guess, yeah, probably went a little quick on this, but we can amend this, or I'll make a motion to amend it as, within the city limits that is not established as a business for such business. Food sales, merchandise sales. This has nothing to do with residential properties. People are still free to have their yard sales. There's no permitting for yard sales. This is what I'm trying to do here is to limit exactly what Alderman Gay
So you're just gonna say it's gonna be on commercial property?
on commercial properties, unless they're indoors, such as like the Bolero, they let people go and that same trailer was parking in front of the Bolero for a while. Then the fireworks stand open, he just moved across the street.
So if he was on the Valero property, that would be okay?
No,
Okay.
not if he's outdoors.
Okay.
The Valero has a permit to sell food inside their store, not outside their store.
If I could make a suggestion, and I think we presented this very early on as a health and sanitation ordinance.
I was gonna address that as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And typically, well, the first issue you have to be considerate of is we have equal protection under the Constitution, so we can't have separate standards. But what a typical health and sanitation ordinance will do is they'll have a set of regulations for permanent establishments like the Valero and whatnot. They'll get an annual health inspection plus random periodic inspections. And then it's the same ordinance, but there's slightly different standards for mobile vehicles, such as a taco shack or a snow cone, or the ice cream man kind of a thing. And both require health inspections, but they're slightly different ordinance because they address the mobility issue. And then some people have like a 1 day or a temporary food vendor license. So if there's a festival or something like that, or if someone is selling food for profit, they come in and the health inspector will do a 1 day inspection. And so they're kind of in those 3 tiers. There's like an event permit, there's a mobile permit, and then there's a permanent establishment permit. You can contract with the health inspector, and a lot of cities just contract with Bear County or San Antonio folks to come in. It's
That's
such a
what I
small.
was gonna bring up, is that, in my dealings here with the county, some other stuff going on with the county, but, if we're all in favor of this, my next step is to be to contact the county and see if we can get a per inspection cost from them, to have them
You
come
can
out.
do that, or you can
and inspect
contract with
these
them
guys.
privately. Some folks just find some, I don't know, find out who's the health inspector here, see, and they'll do it on Saturdays or whatever, their days off, or whatever. So there's different approaches, but it's probably usually cheaper if you contract with them directly. And then as far as the business activity, the non-food sales, most cities create a business license. Sometimes it's free, just requires you to do it. There's a question of garage sales. Some cities will put a floor, like, 12 garage sales are free or no permit, but after 12, it's a business, it's not a garage sale. Some people can have a daily garage sale.
See, what we're trying to tackle is, they're putting clotheslines up there and hanging clothes and t-shirts and everything, and that's what people are seeing when they're driving into our city.
And part of that permit process, for example, is ensuring that the property owner has permission. I've seen businesses where the mobile vendors will be on the side of the road or on a lot, and when you ask, they're unable to provide that because it's an absentee landowner that doesn't know that they're on their property. And so that ensures those types of things. So those can all be permitted. You just got to make sure that in other words, just the way I read this, it was like only for new establishments, whatever rules you set up are across the board. And because it's a public health and safety issue, it's retroactive. So if we establish a new permitting ordinance, then everyone has to get permitted, even if they've already been established.
Would zoning take care of that also, or, I know it's a lot more involved process.
Right. You don't need zoning to regulate food establishments.
Okay.
In fact, you should have one. I mean, because there are food establishments. Zoning would allow you to do land use control, for example, and say this property is residential only and there's no commercial until there's a variance. So it kind of helps you regulate where things go. But as far as a step one, which you could do tomorrow, would be create a permit process that requires a health inspection that adopts the standard health code for Bear County, so that everyone has to live up to it, and that'll give the opportunity to pull a permit if someone's in non-compliance, and it'll make sure that when they do the random inspections that they are getting spot checked, and we know that the temperatures are correct and all of that. And then the fee for the permit, depending on how you want, if you want to keep fees low, you can just make it a pass-through, whatever the inspector is charging, is roughly what the permit is, or some people calculate the administrative costs because the clerk is now going to have to keep a record of permits, and so you can add it a little bit, but it doesn't really have to be very costly. And permits are typically scaled by number of employees. So if you have a taco shack or a taco truck and there's 2 employees, the permit fee might be relatively small, $75, $50. If it's Valero and they have 25 employees, it's going to get up in the few $100 range, just because there's more to inspect. So that's the standard how most health clubs do it. They typically do it by number of employees as they bracket up the permit cost.
What does that mean that Valero is getting inspected right now since it's in the city?
It means that it means that there's no law requiring them to be inspected. They should have had an annual inspection in January, and I know the county was trying to continue those as a courtesy, but the city needs to put a health and sanitation ordinance in place in order to require that on an annual basis. Now, your health and sanitation ordinance also typically addresses things such as trash heaps that create rodents or vermin, that type of thing, so that those can be declared a public nuisance and addressed through the court. Should there be such a thing, someone's dumping their trash in their backyard, and so that's often found in the same ordinance. Or proximity, if there's a trash heap, it can't be within so many feet of a food establishment. All of that kind of stuff.
Can I,
So,
can I ask you a question about the food thing? You know, you have your trucks that are, going, the ice cream trucks and stuff, are those all involved with that type of permit?
Those would be
too?
required to get a permit and an inspection if they wanted to.
Thank you.
Mr. Martinez, the health inspectors normally are employees of the county or the city of, and are they licensed to freelance?
They are. Things may have changed in the last few years, but the last time I looked at it, 3 or 4 years ago, the county was contracting with the city, so they were using city of San Antonio inspectors for their county inspectors. As a cost saving, it was less expensive to do that.
The reason I ask that is because if you get the county inspectors coming in here, it was just, if you start using them, and they're not particularly licensed to freelance, then we would be involved with the county, and that would have to go to the DA for approval.
Right. And you always, it's part of due diligence, you make sure they have permission from their employer to do that. You make that part of the contract, and you can even verify it with your employer. But due to the small number, the scheduled inspections can always be done on the weekends. And the random inspections are typically done, well, they're at random, so that's something you would work out with that individual. When could those be done, based on their work schedule, their days off or whatnot. But most food establishments get at least 2 random inspections throughout the year. And then the annual one, if there's nothing wrong. Obviously, if there's an issue, there'll be re-inspections based on to ensure compliance.
Well, I know that was one of the items on the interlocal agreement, and I think we may have come to a consensus that that's kind of out the door. So we should, I mean, we can and probably should be engaging, we can do these things individually.
Absolutely. I mean, we can bring a proposed ordinance as soon as the next meeting or a special meeting, and
Do a contract.
I know every time we look for a health inspector, they weren't hard to find. I mean, people train, they're licensed, they do it all the time. For them, it's extra money.
And what's exactly the title?
It's a health inspector.
That's what it's called?
Yeah, and they'll typically be employees of the city, or there may be folks out of, Atascosa County or Wilson County. And
So
you
they
can
don't
set
have
up,
to be Bear County.
it doesn't have to be your county, absolutely.
Okay.
Just like anyone else, you can negotiate what they charge. We typically, we did, I think we did on Army, I can't remember the exact fee, but it was like $50 an inspection, it's not familiar. So it's a per inspection rate, and that just gets translated into the permit. So if you anticipate one annual inspection and 2 random, you set the fee.
So the railroad today,
Had you made that motion?
they have a permit in place?
They have a holdover permit from Bear County, but the city, once the city incorporated authority as far as requiring health permits for food establishments, transferred to the city.
Okay.
Since we don't currently require it, you would have to do, there would be a way to address it, but it would be involving the court, it would be much more costly versus if you set up the permitting system, you can literally have your inspector walk in and say, hey, your
Okay.
meat freezers, whatever, and I'm pulling your permit, or if you don't fix this in 2 hours, I'm pulling your permit. And that's usually how you get compliance for
So
it.
this type of ordinance for compliance purposes is outside of the scope of what the marshal would be responsible for. This would be,
Not necessarily, no, well,
you see where I'm going with
Yeah,
this? Okay.
right. Well, how you organize it, your health inspector is more than likely in your city marshal's department or office.
But I mean, from an enforcement perspective, it's not a marshal enforcement,
Right.
it's a health inspector.
It's a health inspector, right? It can become criminal,
Excuse me?
very rarely, but it can become criminal.
I have a problem with what you're talking about. The health inspectors are there to enforce state laws that deal with health issues, right? Within their jurisdiction. You can't go get an Atascosa County inspector to come over here into our county and be inspecting.
No, I think the suggestion wasn't to use them, but those are people that are trained and licensed. Rather than hiring somebody on staff, you can contract with someone who's in that profession to be the Sandy Oaks inspector. And then if Sandy Oaks has any variations, you may pass a health and safety ordinance that's unique to Sandy Oaks, then they would enforce that as well. Though generally speaking, you want to have a community standard type ordinance, at least to begin with.
And, I think it would be imperative that, if we venture into that, we need to have, the language very clear. I think, Mr.
Well,
Chalmers-
based on that, so that we're not revisiting all these items when we come back, and so we're not postponing and such, I'd motion that we accept this, requirement for permits for sales of food and merchandise, with the exception of residential properties. And that we instruct the city attorney to develop our health, safety, and sanitation ordinance for approval. And then based on that, we'd be able to get started. So that's my motion. That we accept this, the requirement for the sales, and that we instruct the city attorney to develop our health and safety and
Then we'll have
sanitation
to bring it
ordinance.
back at the next meeting.
Right.
Well, and you can submit, you can bring the health sanitation ordinance back to the next meeting.
Okay, and just so everyone's clear, if we do set up a permit, we would, you need to draft it out, but it would require a permit, but the permit would have no requirements yet. You just have to come and register with the city.
Okay. Now,
I'm just saying, just based upon that, I mean, we can
We'll
add,
set a
we
fee,
can
as soon
flesh
as we
it out.
have the ordinance, as soon as we have the ordinance in our hand, and we can, just leave those fee portions blank.
Could we not, no, why could we not do like pass-through plus 10%, or pass-through plus, because the fees will vary, yes?
Well, here's a structure that I would recommend, and because you're gonna have other ordinances that have fees and fines. And I already have drafts, I didn't bring them today, they weren't on the agenda, but to set up a structure where we have a master fee schedule and a master fine schedule, and then we put together the ordinance referencing that, because it gets very cumbersome very quickly to look at your fee schedule and your fine schedule and adjust them. You know, sometimes with inflation, people want to increase them, sometimes people want to reduce them. And it becomes very confusing for residents to have to look through every ordinance passed. Once it gets past 100, or even 100 would be a lot to review. So structurally, what we'll do is we'll create a permit, but then we can bring back a master fee schedule and a fine schedule. So every year, for example, in January, typically what you do is you review that, you look at it and say, okay, these are the fees we charge for these things. These are the fines we have. Does anything need to be adjusted? And you look at your budget, for example, and if your health inspector fees suddenly were higher than the permits, then you can adjust the fee. But I recommend doing that structurally from the beginning, because it also gets really complex to dig them out down the road when you get there. And so we already have templates where they're not very complex things, but structurally we would do that. So again, with this permit, you know, you have to set a fee for it, but my recommendation would be wait one more meeting or call a special, even if it's in 72 hours, so we can actually see the draft of the language, so you can have it in there. Otherwise, you're creating a permit without any requirement to it. Or if you're going to do that, just keep it real simple. All businesses have to have a business permit for the city. That's something I can kind of write down right now, and we can pass as the draft language. I just don't like drafting things after they're passed. You don't want to pass it and then read what's in it.
Okay.
That famous quote.
Well, I have another question along those lines. Let's say that a random inspection occurs,
Right.
and whatever establishment does not pass the inspection.
Right.
What happens then?
It depends on the level of the violation. If it's something minor that can be corrected fairly quickly, then the inspector typically makes that recommendation and gives them a chance to comply. If it's something a little bit larger, they may, for example, shut something down. Like if a cooler is too cool or too warm, he may make them shut that down and get rid of that product, and they can operate. Or if it's substantial, they could either shut down the establishment, or, like I said, give them a time frame to
So
come
the
into compliance.
inspector handles that?
It varies, yeah, depending on the severity. Now, if the person refuses, they can always pull the permit. And of course, the person can always be obstinate, and if we're talking about an extreme case, then you would have to call in your law enforcement at that time to actually come in or, shut it down, or go to court and get a court order to shut it down.
What about someone who operates without a permit? Let's say that, not that they had one and they failed an inspection, but they,
It depends on your ordinance. Most city ordinances give people a very short time frame. They can start business and they have to get an inspection and permit within 48 hours or 72 hours. But if there's someone operating without a permit, the health inspector, or even the clerk can go in and say, let them know and do a stop order, but you need some type of law enforcement to do that. So your marshal would then go in and shut down the establishment because of no permit, or they can give them a fine. There'll be a fine component in this as well. But because it's a public health and safety issue, they can actually shut it down. But in my experience, most people are very, they understand what they need to do. What you'll get a lot of is people will get especially the mobile vendors, they'll have a permit from the city of San Antonio, and then they'll try to bring it into your city, and you'll get a lot of, but I have a permit that's from San Antonio, and they don't necessarily understand that it doesn't transfer. Unless you guys want to do reciprocity and say that's fine, it's up to you. But that's the most common non-compliance that I've seen.
Which I think we need to get it started somewhere, so,
Sure.
can you prepare an ordinance, a health and safety ordinance for the next meeting? And I'll motion that we postpone this to the next meeting to be addressed
now, these would be two
with
separate
the ordinance in
items.
hand.
You're not gonna have health and safety dealing with selling of merchandise.
No,
Okay,
so
so
that
it'd
would
be
just be included, we need to add that in.
Separate?
Just, yeah.
So we want the health and safety,
Health and safety,
we want the business permit,
business permit,
okay, and then we want the fee schedule and the
right.
fee schedule and the fine schedule.
And this is with the exception of residential properties.
Okay. Do you want to directly address garage sales?
Yard sales, garage sales, whatever, they're exceptions.
well, he said excluding residential
Excluding.
properties,
Okay.
Yeah, we,
so only on commercial.
there's a few people that run a garage sale monthly out here, but they're not a whole lot of them. And they're not